This is Closer by Dennis Cooper. Part 8. Steve, the Forefront. 1 month ago, I decided to use our garage for a nightclub. I told Dad the yard was so huge my noise wouldn't bother the neighbors, and how out of touch he'd grown. He agreed. I felt sure he would. I can't remember the last time he turned me down. It's a 4-car garage with this peaked ceiling, crisscrossed by sturdy oak beams that make me think of a church, though I've never been in one. It didn't need much alteration. I just moved stuff out into the storeroom and painted the walls flat black. I like flat black. It doesn't try to explain anything, and it's been hip since before I was born, I guess. Tonight's the opening. I Xeroxed flyers and put one in every locker at school. I knocked a hole in the wall, which will act as an entrance. My oldest friend, Keith, made some music tapes. He'll man the sound on this platform we laid across part of the rafters. Fred and Jerry from gym class agreed to be bouncers. Another friend, Jane, will tend bar. To the left of the bar are 2 portable toilets Keith found on a freeway construction site. One is for pissing and shitting. The other's my office, so-called. That's where I plan to seduce people, as well as do what real club owners must. I think of everything. My club's called The Forefront. That's the name of a band I like. They're obscure, so most people will guess it's original. A while ago, Mom and Dad popped in to check out the premises. He strolled around and went, when things caught his eye. Keith said that meant he was tongue-tied. Mom's worried some drunk will scratch her car, which is parked on the street. I reassured her, then thought, yeah, she's probably right. They just left. I'm crazy about the club's door. It's so raw. You can see all the plaster and everything. It looks like someone wanted in so intensely they couldn't wait. When I tell Keith I'm off to the shower, he doesn't hear. Then I notice the headphones. I point toward the house. He points at the tape deck. I flip him off. He gives the OK sign. I laugh. He laughs. Well, if nothing else happens tonight, I'll take him up on his offer. He has a dazzling ass, though I'm bored with it. I can't remember the night we met. It was 2 years ago when we were 16, I guess. I was drunk. He looked exactly like somebody else. He still does, but nowadays when we fuck, I can guess what he's thinking. That doesn't ruin the experience. On the other hand, it doesn't help. The shower head has a massage unit. It makes my skin itch, but tilted up slightly and aimed at one wall, the stall roars like a fountain. I sprawl near the drain and peer up at the steam, which I use like a horny kid uses his pillow. It's Keith. I use Keith as a model because I can draw mental pictures of him. After a while, I stop dreaming it's him, hide his face with some strangers until I arrive at this star from the 60s, who played John Wayne's son in Harm's Way. I make his eyes look in love with me. I moan. That echoes. I spurt on my chest. I should have waited until tonight. I towel off, then slip into my suit. It cost Dad a fortune. The coat and pants are made of this light fabric, dark gray with black smears and white crinkly lines. They look like cigarette ashes. My shoes come to sharp points. They used to be brown, but I painted them white so my feet would seem bigger. My hair stands on end, thanks to Tenax. If I didn't know my reflection, I'd fuck me to death. I'm sort of ogling it when my mom appears over its shoulder. "I'm worried your music will keep us awake," she says. How many times have I told them their bedroom's so far away from the garage, all they'll hear is a very low, regular thump. "It'll lull you to sleep." Back in the club, Jane is stacking up beer cans behind the bar, which is really an ironing board spray-painted red. It's supposed to look stupid. Fred and Jerry are giving her shit, but it's all just a mating dance. Mostly it shows up as awkwardness, which, on guys their height and build, means a very broad slapstick. "Ahem," I say. They scurry over. Stand guard, and if anyone tries to sneak in who isn't dressed like they live in the mid-1980s, send for me. They answer, "Right," simultaneously. Fred's cute. I'd sit on his face if he shaved first. Keith starts his soundtrack. We've a mutual fondness for gloomy perspectives and danceable beats. When they clash, it creates the impression our bodies are headed somewhere, not just losing weight. That's the finishing touch. Our garage disappears in the tar-colored paint. Any second now, people will file in with better-than-average looks on their faces. I take a cruise through the room. When nobody is watching, and who would, I lean down and kiss the cement, my way of christening the place. "Make me famous," I say in a jokey voice. Keith saw me do it. He's licking his tape deck. Eat shit. Here they come. I shake hands with the first several entrants, then climb up the ladder and sit beside Keith. He lays out 4 lines of his private cocaine on the tape deck. We snort it away through a $10 bill. As the room starts to bustle, we chat in a nerve-wracking whine we've developed to crack ourselves up. A great new song by the Swans is drowning us out. Greed, I think it's called. We go insane when this born-again Christian we know actually sobs when the lyrics begin. Carl, they're ironic. That's hilarious, at least on coke. Coke also makes Keith seem different, by which I mean better, by which I mean hot. "Steve!" It's Jerry. He waves his arms wildly, then heads for the door. I descend from the platform, salute a few friends, and rearrange my suit. Just as I'd hoped, the shambling boy a little cuter than me has appeared in his usual post-hippie, pre-punk regalia. Old jeans, frayed t-shirt, unkempt hair. He's decayed of late, but it works. "Boss," Fred says firmly, "I thought we'd consult you on this." The boy, his first name's on the tip of my tongue, looks very drunk and collapsible. "Yes, I can see what you mean," I sigh, wagging my head. "Young man, please come to my office." I lock us inside and sit down on the seat cover. He stands between me and the door, trying to keep his eyes open. "We've got a problem here," I announce, using my dad's tone of voice. He doesn't say anything. "Look, I'm going to say something ugly. Since this is my club, and you obviously don't like its rules, why should I treat you respectfully? I'll let you stay for a price." I suppose that strange frown on his face means his wallet is empty. "No, my club, your ass." It's a terrible line, but I had to think fast. "Okay?" He frowns at me for a while, then slowly nods his head. I follow him out. The club's a humongous hit. I waste my time on Keith's perch, mouthing lyrics and bragging about my success with... I still don't remember his name. Keith wants a rundown first thing in the morning. It's late. A few dancers keep bouncing around, but the sidelines are empty except for a few tangled couples and wallflowers. My flowers wilted. He's flat on the floor. If he'd tried to leave, I gave my bouncers permission to get in the way. I can't remember the pretext. "Keith, can you lock up?" "Asshole," he snarls, which I guess means he will. I climb down the ladder. The boy sees me coming, I think. I don't know what to say. We're in bed. George has passed out or gone to sleep. His ass looks like somebody threw a grenade at it. He said he fell on some glass. I covered it with a blanket as soon as he dozed off. I tried to seem interested. I closed my eyes and formed a picture of Keith. Even then, when I started to finger-fuck George, which is my favorite sex act, I might as well have been trying to plug a leak. He just lay there and let it go on, as if I were a bad dream or something. I almost threw up twice. At one point I paused and sort of shook him, but he'd faded into wherever he is at the moment. Normally when I'm in bed with someone I'm not hot for, I ask him to leave. I wished I said so the second George stripped. If I kick him out now, I'll feel guilty forever. I'd always worry I might have helped. Not that I know how I could. He must get rejected a lot. I mean, his face is so promising. I could phone at least 4 friends tomorrow and break their hearts. plus put myself in a privileged position. His ass is a great piece of gossip. So why am I looking at him like my dad looked at me when I fell off our roof? Is that love, or anywhere close to it? I don't understand the word, though I've relied on it often enough. Saying love is like saying ouch when something should hurt but doesn't. It's a quick way to win points. For instance, last weekend I slept with a tall, gloomy boy in an overcoat. He was at Music Plus, buying the same British import I had. I coaxed him home. We didn't smile at each other once. Sex was defined by our musical tastes. We fooled around with our crotches and assholes like they were knobs on a stereo amp. I decided "I love you" would sound good against a shrill background. It did. I wish I had it on videotape. The closest I've come to saying something like that with sincerity was to an older guy. He had this trick where he'd say, "Spill your guts." Well, I did. He would nod his approval as if I were reading his mind in the right tone of voice. He had me fooled. I said I loved him so often he ran out of clever retorts. The 10th time you hear it, "Oh, Steve, you're too kind," isn't sweet anymore. The last time we met, I was searching for him in the glare on a windshield. All I saw were his fists. They were hooked on the steering wheel. The rest seemed, and still is, shit. The way I feel about George is a first. Wait, I take that back. When I was 12, I hung around with a gang of boys who, like myself, were obsessed with, I hate to admit it, Led Zeppelin. One guy's younger brother was dying to join us. He'd sit down nearby, wearing very bright clothes so we couldn't not notice him. After a while, I decided I had more to gain from the boy than from knowing who played lead guitar on which album. I waved. He waved back. I think he was cute and had a slight speech impediment. 2 days or so later, I heard a noise at my parents' front door. We'd meet on the weekends, see movies. His eyes had big question marks scribbled all over them, like a character in a comic book. "What's going on?" he'd ask, and I'd fill him in. "When couples like one another, they scream a lot," for example. Then the word gay snuck into the dialogue of some movie. When my friends dreamt of X-raying skirts, I'd been bored or felt antsy at best. But boys' pants were still seat covers, grass-stained and worn loose on purpose. Gay is what David Bowie pretends to be when he makes records. Weeks passed. We were looking through one of my mom's fashion magazines. I'd paused too long on this picture. A woman in a topless bikini, her back to the camera. "She looks like me," my friend gasped. He was eyeing the image with what I guess is called wonder. "How so?" I asked. "I don't know," he replied. That was my cue to explain the world. I examined the girl's back again. Meanwhile, he removed his shirt and stood facing the window. I glanced from one to the other. I guess it was only the pose, but I wanted his body. And, as with the girl in the photograph, I didn't know how to reach it, nor what I would do if I could. So I held back, did nothing. He died in a plane crash soon after. I must have the clipping somewhere. I loved him. I think I could say that, if someone were listening. The sun's up. I want to tell George what I'm thinking about. But it takes me a while to actually reach out my hand. Maybe 10 minutes. "George?" His eyes open. I say where he is, how terrific last night was, how much I enjoy what I know of him, the desire to be friends, or more than friends, that he's special, I know this already, and so on. He doesn't answer. I hear myself mouthing stuff I can't believe, yet I want him to think I'm not lying. He means something. Who knows what? I can't describe it. Believe me. He smiles at that, which I will take to mean thanks. Now I'd like him to leave, temporarily anyway. I want to put on a record and rethink my night, get the messy or half-baked ideas out. I set a date when we'll meet again. He takes the hint, hits his feet, and looks around for his shorts. In the daylight, his scars are more savage. If I had to compare them to anything, I'd say a human brain drawn by a 4-year-old. I want to see it in friendly terms, so we can joke about it at some point. But not now. I really feel like I'm going to faint if he doesn't. I notice his shorts lying under my desk chair. "There they are!" I shriek. "There! There!" I just woke up from a dream. The kind where you can recognize where you are and how you're acting, but not why or what it means. It made me think of some underground films I've watched, so cheaply made you can feel the director's hands and see the actors as well as the characters, but too poetic to follow. I was raking leaves in our front yard. Each time I'd lift my rake, the leaves would return to their places. I knelt down and looked closely. The fuckers were painted. The lawn was a huge cloth stretched over the ground. Just then everything grew very dark, like it's supposed to do during an eclipse. I glanced up. I was inside my club. I felt nervous. The forefront looked different, its bar lit by banks of lights, ripped velvet couches along the wall, and, most unnerving, the entrance seemed very meticulous. I'd tried too hard to simulate rawness. It felt calculated and chic, which are my least favorite feelings on Earth. I searched around for a hammer, intending to smash things. That took forever. A crowd began forming outside, their faces pinched with impatience. I glanced at my watch. The club was supposed to be open, but none of my friends had shown up to work. I knew I should calm the crowd down, but when I looked out again, they were no more lifelike than the leaves at my feet. Someone had walled up the hole and drawn a crowd on the plaster. Amazed, I walked toward it. The drawing grew vaguer, first impressionistic, then clouded, its surface illusory, like marble. Soon I began to see patterns. The swirls became streaks that connected like lines on a road map. The lines became cracks. They sprouted tinier ones. I tried to run. The wall, the club, the garage collapsed. I'd pulled the blankets over my head. Which came first, the after-image of light through woven cloth, or the dream wall? Did I wake up before, hide my head, then return to sleep? It doesn't matter. I'm startled, though not so upset I can't shampoo my hair. I drift through breakfast, then drift through the first half of school. I'm a minor celebrity, thanks to the club. 2 weeks after the opening, students still yell, "You're that guy," or "Can't wait to get back to the forefront again." In 28 minutes and 13 seconds, the lunch bell will ring. I've agreed to meet up with a guy named John something, who wants to propose a mingling of the club with his artworks. Until then, I'm foraging through my bad dream, seeking symbols and so forth, because of this ancient book we've been discussing in English class. It seems that in BC years, dreams were considered advisory. Governments, armies, religious types used them as maps to their destinies. So far, I think that mysterious wall implied George. Everything else seems peripheral, though I admit I'm afflicted with love's tunnel vision at present. There's John by the half-dead magnolia tree. Each time he gets the same haircut, it's more dated. I used to think he was cute. He had a big show of drawings at school a few months ago. I agree with Keith. He looked them over and quipped, "Here's a guy who'd watch newsreels of Nazi death camps, then say something like, 'Wow, this old black and white film stock is beautiful.' The only reason I'm talking to him is his boyfriend, who's scrumptious, but nowhere in sight. We shake hands. He makes his proposal. The plan is to do a theme night, hang his portraits around and have a reading of poems by the closet case teacher McGo, his co-conspirator. Sounds good? I'm all for creating an atmosphere to keep my patrons on edge. Besides, George has a birthday this weekend. I'll dedicate it to our love, or, better yet, make the night a surprise party thrown in his honor. Okay, I grin. Once the date's fixed, We sit and just stare at each other. With him, it's my natural tendency anyway. There's something generic about his face, like it belongs on a bust titled Man. I think what I wanted to fuck about him was his makeup. Toned down, he's a mild shock at best. Here, he says suddenly. This will explain it. He hands me a folder and walks away. I take a leisurely scan through the contents. First, there's a handful of poems, which I'll scrutinize later. On first glance, they seem overwritten. The Xeroxed pages of John's art are more my speed. They're dark and messy on purpose, I'm sure. A scribbled note says they're part of a series called Ownership, that 1 and 2 should be paired off, 3 and 4, 5 and 6 likewise. Each duo contains an incompetent face, left, and a primitive ass, right. I think they portray real-life couples. I guess the idea is all asses are very alike, and their value depends on the people who love them or something. Page 5 looks familiar. I hold it at arm's length, squint. Sure enough, John's in there somewhere, which must mean the turmoil on page 6 is what's-his-name's ass. I turn it this way, then that, hold it up to the light. I squeal into our driveway and tiptoe upstairs before Mom says, "Nice day, Steve?" Reaching my bed, I collapse and unzip my slacks. The drawing clenched in my left fist, I zoom past the pencil marks, mentally discarding each clumsy, extraneous line until John's lover's ass is my property. I need immense concentration to sort it out, and even then, the thing's pretty shapeless, like spilled milk. I'm so involved, I mistake a loud knock on my door for the sound of my heart. Steve?" It's George's voice. That's right. We agreed he'd drop by today. I shove my cock down my pants, hide the drawing, and let him in. When I see his face, I think, why not have sex right this second? Well, what's-his-name's ass is still fresh. I kiss him brusquely. He tastes like a hamburger. I steer us onto the bed. Clothes are flying around. He lies on his back. I fold his legs until his knees touch his shoulders. I pin him there with my shoulders. There are almost identical spots on each ass cheek, where his skin's as smooth as a normal boy's. I press my hands down there, stick my cock up his ass, then look into his eyes. They seem scared of the ceiling for some reason. I can't believe my luck. He's very loose, but I find if I press very hard he tightens up, and there's enough inner friction to get me off. Afterward, we sit and talk. As usual, I'm the big blabbermouth trying to suss out what he has been doing. Nothing is his final word on the subject. Okay, I won't press. Instead, I play an old Sisters of Mercy LP. I like them because they're so stoned or depressed or whatever. They think their own deaths are a hip place to be. I'm content on the outskirts, one eye on how George is reacting. He's face down a few feet away, lying so still it's like he's not listening, more like he's dead or has left his nude body idling in my room. It's a spooky sight. I'm almost sure I'm in love with it. 1 hour and counting. Keith's on his perch queuing tapes with a coked-out expression. John's hanging the last of his portraits. They cover the walls. His boyfriend is striking ridiculous poses behind a microphone stand, where Mago will deliver some poetry I never read. He's in my office, rehearsing his stuff. Fred and Jerry just told me John's drawings are sick. Jane's her same old reliable self, stacking beer cartons, penciling signs which read, "Please tip." I've positioned myself dead center, ringmaster-like, and conduct them with jabs and shouts. I'm tense. See, I hadn't told John that tonight was a party until a few minutes ago. When George's name came up, he swore and stormed off. Mago explained that to me. George and John were an item. He found it amusing. Now I'm worried about his connection, because he hazed over at one point, clapped his hands and said, "Miles here? Terrific!" I guess I could take down the banner which reads, "The George Miles Club," Or is that too drastic? There could be 1,000 more items out there in the world. I'm a latecomer. Accept it, jerk. I try to relax by watching John's friend pretend he's whoever. George Michael? He looks like a twerp, or I use this excuse to slow him down for a chat. Getting ready for later on? I suggest. He quits moving mechanically, smiles at me, blushes. Yes, I am. We start to talk about nothing much. Unlike most pretty boys, he doesn't seem to be letting his looks do the work, merely speaking through them with an anomalous voice, like someone at a costume ball. It's disconcerting, as though I'm addressing him, then being answered by an interpreter. We're out of things to say. Shake hands. I let myself hold his a second too long. Who knows what message he's getting? I stroll down a row of John's drawings. Some of the models are still recognizable, people I've seen around school. Then I notice the tags. These aren't couples, but different parts of the same person. I think of that scene on my bed with the sketch in my fist. I glance back at the kid, who's conferring with John. About me, I guess. Hey, yells the artist. He glides over. My little friend thinks you're cute. I mean, he thinks George is cute, but he likes George's men. Look, I'll explain it some other time. Point is, you interested? Sex, I mean. Now, him. I'm torn. Sure, I say, but I don't even know the guy's name. David, John smiles. Like the statue. He rejoins the beauty. He puts his hand over the microphone, says a few words, pats David's head and nudges him in my general direction. David's gorgeous. He's smiling like people do under hypnosis. It's pointed here, but I don't feel the warmth. I nod. He nods. I walk, assuming he'll follow. I peer up at Keith. His eyes are moving with us through the room. When he's sure it's the office we're aimed at, his fist hammers down on the tape deck. I'm poised to knock on the door when I'm sideswiped by John again. Steve, he gasps, do you know Cliff? I shake my head. If you meet him tonight, then he whispers so David can't hear, don't mention this. Whoosh. He's somewhere across the club. What's that about? I knock gently. Mago sticks his head out. I don't have to ask. He grabs a handful of papers and leaves, mumbling something too flowery to be intended for us. We're in. I could ask what the George angle is, but that would waste time and force me to question my motives. Instead, I strip him while he shifts his weight from one leg to the other. Our choices are standing or taking turns on the toilet. I hog the latter. He revolves jerkily, feeding me parts of his front and back. He's very clean and kind of tasteless, like plastic. I try the old finger approach, really scrounge around inside his ass. Even there, where I'd expect some surprises, he's smooth and immaculate. My first impression returns, that his beauty and he are in different worlds, with separate aims. Only now it's his skin I've engaged, and he's elsewhere. Once he looks down and includes me in some unknown way in his thoughts. Another time he says something I can't really hear in a strange voice. Face the door, okay? Asses are peaceful. I like them the same way I like flat black paint, and his is one of the flattest I've seen. George's must have resembled it. Not long ago I went to bed with a guy who was wild about mine. He drew a smiley face on it with a grease pencil, to justify his desires, I guess. But it's the plainness that gives me the goosebumps. I pry the cap off a Vaseline jar, coat one fingertip, wipe it off inside his ass, screw him onto my cock. He bounces up and down. I kiss his shoulders and shoot. Was I a hit? He asks, freeing himself. Sure, great, I say, zipping up. Tell George I'm great, okay? I say I will, but I won't. He turns left, John, and I turn right, entrance. People are filing through. Keith's tape has reached a song so obscure even I can't recognize who's singing. This one deserves its obscurity, but the funereal pace strikes the right tone, and nobody's listening anyway. Suddenly, Fred, asked to signal when George hits the foot of the driveway, waves his arms. I take my place at the microphone, tap to make sure it's on, and say, Ladies and gentlemen, as you may already know, tonight's a surprise party. The guest of honor will walk through the door any second. When I count to 3, raise your beers and shout, "Our hero!" Heads swivel around. People furthest back stand on their toes. My view is blocked. I hear George's voice squeak, "Oh, shit." I forget to count. Keith must have noticed me frozen in place. He shouts, 1, 2, 3! Bottles soar, voices clash, yet the message is clear. I weave through the drunks to the first strains of Keith's pre-taped greeting, the theme from 2001. When I reach George, he's trembling as he occasionally does. "It's okay," I say. "Nobody's looking at you anymore." George is so stoned he can't fix his eyes on me. "Steve?" he slurs. "Who are they?" I explain how tonight is a gift from the good part of me, the part of me who means well and couldn't hurt him. He's smiling. I'm going to say it. I haven't meant it since I was 3 or whatever. I love you, George. I think I meant that. I think he heard, though interpreting someone's expression is hardly a science, at least for me. I tend to guess. My guess is he's too scarred to think about love at this time, but may later, which is the most anyone can expect. We watch Mago read. People keep entering the club, so there's a continual din at the door. Mago will say something too fancy and incomprehensible, then we'll hear, "Hey, what the fuck's going on?" The only reason he's not being pelted with beer is the teacher mystique. A few braver students have slunk away, including David. He's back by the wall being George Michael. Not sexy. I put my arm around George. He rests his chin on my shoulder. I kiss his temple, believe it or not. That's when I hear this roar. It's growing louder. I can't hear the poetry anymore. I turn and look. David's playing an air guitar. He strikes an especially violent chord. A car smashes right through the wall, rolls over David and comes to rest, barely scratched, in a heap of bricks. The driver's and passenger's doors open. 2 guys with long hair step out holding half-empty bottles of vodka. They fall down. They roll around laughing and banging their fists on the floor. The passenger gets to his feet, but is too out of it and collapses, laughing. The driver catches his breath long enough to squeal, "Sorry, we're late!" That makes them howl again. I step over the passenger, crouch, and peer under the wreck. David's body is shredded like paper. His insides have pushed through some holes in his shirt, blue and greasy and jumbled. It looks like a flower bed. I have to imagine he's something else or I'll throw up. "Get help!" I yell. The passenger has risen up on his elbows. He's taking a drink from the bottle. "Where's George?" Mago knocks some people aside and asks, "Is he dead?" I nod. He leaves, then I hear his amplified voice say, "I want to ask you, please, for a minute of silence." "Where's George?" When things quiet down, I hear the driver still laughing. I walk around the front end of the car and kick him as hard as I can in the head. So much for the forefront. Police came. After arresting the long hairs and making sure David's corpse got to the ambulance, they said our house wasn't zoned for a nightclub. I shut down. Dad hired some workers to fix the walls. It's a 4-car garage again. I'm still upset about that. 2 days ago, this freckled guy in a wheelchair, whose parents are richer than mine even, offered to have his dad, a politician of some sort, bribe the police if I made him co-owner and renamed the place Haunted Nightclub. I gave that 1/10 of a second's thought. By far the best thing to come from the accident is George's ass, which doesn't frighten me now. I can look at it, like you can look at a horror film. It's like this. I think I was after perfection, but wouldn't admit it. Take my weird dream where the club was transformed from a ratty hole into a fake ratty hole, and the tensions between the two caused my whole dream to collapse. I had this dualistic thing going on in my head, loving George, a mess, and wanting David, a perfect mess. I was a lot more confused than I let on. This sounds crazy, I know, but when I saw David there with his insides exposed, the perfection thing uglified. Is that a word? I mean, perfection's like God. It only works if you want it badly enough or... shit. I'm all tangled up. I'll try again. I could have used David's death as an excuse to believe in perfection, since I'd never gotten to know him aside from his looks. So, in a sense, being dead, he is perfect. I went to his funeral. It crossed my mind. There's a kind of excitement about any box when you don't feel you know what's inside. It was like Christmas in hell, standing there with those other friends, hearing a priest tell us David would live in our hearts forever. Then they buried the thing, so none of us would feel left out, I guess. We all suffer, he said. The box made a terrible creak as it went under. When that was over, the kid's mother, a total drunk, I might add, came up to George and asked, "Are you George?" He told her he was. "Well," she said, "David talked about you all the time. It was hard for his father and me to separate what he fantasized, which was a lot, if truth be told, from his real life. But now I see you are real, and I know you two must have been special friends. So let me thank you for taking good care of our boy, for Dave, his dad, and myself." She left. George shot me one of his terrified looks. "I said maybe 10 words to him in my whole life," he whispered. "The guy was insane. I never liked him for 1 minute." He sat down so suddenly I almost tripped over him. Then, with the ominous voice of what I think are called mediums, like at seances, he told me exactly what happened to him that he came to be like this. He didn't remember that much. I sat down, because he'd been stoned, and his manner of speaking leaves everything sketchy, so it was a chore to keep names, dates, etc. straight. But the story was scary enough that I flopped on my back at one point, sort of theatrically, though I couldn't have helped it, and felt like crying, except I don't cry. I never do. It just absolutely never happens. It's 4 days later. I'm telling Keith how I phoned the old man who hurt George and announced if he ever got anywhere near us, that if anyone in my small circle of friends or acquaintances disappeared, I'd call the cops. He could do what he wanted, but not in my world. I didn't say who I was and hung up. Keith is shaking his head. We're in bed. We just had sex, which was very expected and pleasant. "I'm sure it's true," he says. "Trouble is, I only know about death from song lyrics and movies, so I don't know how to react, except to say, wow, though it's a bigger, more serious wow than usual." We decide to have sex again. As we do, I take occasional snorts from Keith's cocaine supply. Coke creates distances between its users and others, especially other users. That's how Keith can be my oldest friend 1 minute, a relative stranger the next. Even without Coke, that happens. I think it's the voice. People don't really know one another except when they're speaking. As soon as they shut up, no matter how close they've been, that understanding is gone. They become cute, ugly, tall, short, fat, thin. I find this frightening most of the time, but it's the best part of sex. Keith's just some hot guy I picked up. Nice. Afterwards, he hands me most of his Coke. "For George," he says, "who deserves it. He claims he'll call me tomorrow. He has an idea we could restart the club. He knows of this old house that nobody lives in, not far from here. According to him, we could fix up its living room, soundproof the walls, and continue in privacy, by invitation. I guess it's possible. Speaking of which, I've been dying to tell you a secret," he grins, "but promise you'll keep it quiet." My eyes widen. He rolls his. I'm seeing John. He opens his wallet, then slides out some paper. He unfolds the paper and shows me. It's a terrible drawing, of Keith, I guess. "That's just a Xerox," he says, "but the original's some kind of masterpiece." I'm surprised. Keith's great, but facially he's not in David's league, and, according to what I know, John isn't really Keith's type. Keith's the perfectionist, same as I was. I congratulate him, and we have a brief talk about whether we've grown more mature or not. He's gone. I sit around for a while, then I follow the sound of the TV set into our den, and join my mom on the couch. Dad's in the bathroom, apparently. "What's this?" I ask. An extremely intelligent drama, she says, and recounts the award-winning life of its main star, an ancient woman whose name has the word dame in front of it. I get involved in the show because the dame's grandson character, who sits at a table and doesn't say anything, is my age, and cute. It must be 4 hours long, yet the boy stays peripheral, appearing once in a while to remind us, I guess, of how old the woman is. When George rings our doorbell, I don't care if things work out. We head to my room and sit around. It's hard to know how to say what I feel because, 1, I've never paid much attention, and 2, George never answers me anyway. "Look what Keith gave us," I smirk, producing the Coke. We do some, which makes him look different. He lies on the bed and unbuttons his shirt. Great nipples. I cross the room, switch off the lights, and try to feel my way back to him. "George?" I just hit my leg on a table or something. It's really black in here.